A crack split the ridge, and Sergeant Hale vanished in the dust. Below, the SEAL team hugged the rocks with no cover left. Muzzle flashes snapped from the tree line, cutting the air into shreds. Chief Mercer dragged a wounded operator behind a boulder and barked, "We're out of time." Then the shot came again, clean, distant, impossible. A woman stood high on the ridge, half hidden by broken stone and smoke. She wore a worn field jacket, her hair tied back tight, her rifle steady against her shoulder. No insignia. No fear. Just control. One of the younger SEALs stared up at her. "Who the hell is that?" She did not answer. Another round cracked out. An enemy machine gun nest went silent. Mercer tracked the ridge through his scope. "She's hitting targets at extreme range. Friendly or not?" Hale shouted. The woman shifted position, calm and exact, and put a second round into an enemy spotter before he could call coordinates. Sand burst around his body. The ridge went quiet for half a second. Then more fire erupted from the far slope. The SEALs had seconds left before the flank collapsed. Mercer grabbed his radio, but static swallowed the channel. Their designated overwatch was gone. Their extraction window was burning down. And somehow, from the ridge above them, this unknown woman had already decided to fight for them. Hale pushed to one knee and looked up at her through the smoke. She was not moving like a civilian caught in the wrong place. She was choosing angles. Counting distance. Waiting for the next threat before anyone else could see it. A mortar round landed near the trail, showering stone over the team. She snapped her rifle toward the blast site. One shot. The mortar crew vanished in dirt and flame. The younger SEAL swallowed hard. She just saved us. Mercer did not lower his weapon. Maybe. But the ridge told a different story. The woman's fire was too precise, too disciplined, too intentional. She wasn't reacting to the battle. She was controlling it. And just as Mercer started to realize she knew exactly what was buried on that ridge, she turned her rifle toward the enemy and fired again. Mercer still aimed at the ridge, but the battlefield had changed. The mortar crew was gone. The enemy line was broken. Dust rolled through the blast scar where their firing position had been a heartbeat earlier. For the first time since the ambush began, there was silence enough to hear the click of cooling metal. "Move," the younger SEAL snapped, already dragging a wounded teammate behind a boulder. Mercer did not move. His eyes stayed locked on the woman above them. Too calm. Too precise. Too familiar. A fresh round cracked through the air and struck the enemy machine gun nest with surgical force. One gunner pitched backward. The second scrambled for cover. The ridge answered her fire like it had been waiting for her all along. Then the woman shifted position. Not random. Not panicked. Tactically sound. Mercer finally saw it, she was pulling the enemy away from the buried asset on the ridge, not just clearing the hill. Every shot forced them farther from the narrow choke point behind the rock shelf. The younger SEAL looked up. "Is she covering us?" "Not us," Mercer muttered. "Something else." A shout came from the enemy flank. Two fighters broke from cover and sprinted toward the ridge crest, desperate to reach whatever had survived the mortar strike. The woman fired twice. Both men fell before they made 5 steps. The younger SEAL stared. "Who the hell is she?" Mercer's jaw tightened. He had seen marksmen under pressure. He had seen scouts with good eyes. But this was different. The cadence, the spacing, the restraint, this was not survival fire. It was a lock on the battlefield. Then he noticed the radio clipped to her shoulder harness. Not civilian. Not improvised. Military issue. And not just any unit setup. His pulse slowed one beat, then hardened. "Don't fire unless I say," he ordered. The younger SEAL blinked. "Why?" Because if she wanted us dead, we'd already be gone. Up on the ridge, the woman slid behind a gray slab of stone, reloaded with one hand, and never once took her eyes off the tree-line. Her breathing stayed even. Her posture never broke. The enemy tried to reposition. She anticipated it. A round punched through the brush and dropped the next man before he even found his scope. Mercer felt the shape of the truth pressing at the edge of memory. Not who she was. Not yet. What she had come here for. Something vital sat on that ridge, hidden under the rock shelf and the smoke. Something the enemy had been willing to die for. Something she was now defending with the kind of discipline that came from oath, not chance. The younger seal swallowed. If she's with us, why didn't she say anything? Mercer did not answer. Because the answer had already started to arrive. The woman wasn't waiting to be introduced. She was waiting for the right moment to reveal what the ridge had been hiding. Mercer lowered his binoculars and studied the ridge line through the drifting smoke. The woman had moved again. Not far. Just enough to keep the enemy guessing, just enough to stay above the blast line, just enough to remind the seals that every shot she took was measured. Her rifle rested against one knee now, dark steel against pale dust. No insignia. No call sign. No visible unit patch. Nothing that could explain why she moved like someone who had already survived this mountain once before. Stay low, Mercer said. A round snapped overhead and cut a fresh line through the air where the youngest seal had been a second earlier. He flinched hard, then froze. Mercer's jaw tightened. Move left. 3 feet. Rock cover. The team shifted on his command, but his eyes never left the woman. He had met snipers before. Army, Marine, private, foreign. Some were clean, some reckless, some brilliant. This one was different. Her fire was not random. It was timed to the second, chained to the enemy's movement, designed to keep the ridge from collapsing while also keeping the seals alive. That meant one thing. She knew the ground better than they did. A shout rose from the far side of the ridge. One of the enemy spotters had found a lane through the dust and was trying to push forward with 2 men behind him. Mercer saw the angle, saw the threat, and started to rise. Before he could, a crack split the air. The spotter dropped. The 2 behind him dove for cover, but the woman's next round drove one of them back into the rocks. The other vanished behind a broken ledge. Mercer stared for half a beat, then shifted his focus to the woman again. "Who are you?" he called. No answer. A second later, a wind gust dragged the smoke across the ridge and exposed a pale strip of fabric tied around her wrist. Mercer caught only a flash of it, but it was enough to make him narrow his eyes. Not standard issue. Not local. Not random. His radio hissed with static, then a clipped burst came through from command. The valley was still blocked, extraction delayed, enemy movement increasing from the east slope. Mercer looked downhill, then back to the ridge, and understood the real problem. They were not dealing with one battlefield. They were trapped between 2. The woman snapped her rifle up and fired once more, then shifted position in a low crawl that kept her body almost flat to the rock. Efficient. Controlled. No wasted motion. No panic. The younger seal watched her with open suspicion. If she's helping us, why won't she come down? Mercer did not answer at first. Because he could not decide whether she was waiting for trust, or baiting them into the open. Then he saw it. A small metal marker half buried near the ridge edge, exposed by the last blast. Not military. Not random debris. It had been placed there, and the woman's path had been curving around it the entire time. Mercer's expression hardened. She was not just covering the ridge. She was guarding something on it. And whatever it was, the enemy now knew they were close. From the east slope, a fresh burst of gunfire erupted. Closer this time. Faster. Mercer lifted his weapon and took command of the team with one sharp motion. "Forget the question," he said. "Hold this line." Then, toward the ridge, quieter now, almost like a challenge he expected only she could hear. "If you know who we are, you know this much. We do not leave our own behind." The woman did not look at him. She changed position instead. And that silence made Mercer realize the next answer would not come from her mouth. It would come from what she chose to protect next. The ridge answered with another crack, but the shot did not come from the valley. Mercer's head snapped up. High on the broken stone, between two slumped boulders, the woman shifted just enough for the scope glint to vanish. No warning flare. No shouted signal. Only a clean, distant report that cut through the smoke and dropped the enemy spotter before he could range the mortar pit again. The SEALs held their line, but the battlefield had started listening to her. 3 men moved to flank the slope. Their boots scraped shale. Their radios hissed. Then one of them folded backward, his rifle spinning out of his hands. Another tried to crawl behind a slab of granite and never made it there. The third froze long enough to look up, and that hesitation cost him his life. Mercer tracked the ridge through the sight and caught fragments instead of answers, a braid disappearing behind stone, a sleeve dark with dust, the flat discipline of someone who never fired twice from the same angle. Every round came from somewhere just out of reach, each one placed with the cold certainty of a surgeon. "Whoever she is," one of the operators muttered, "she's keeping the enemy pinned." Mercer didn't answer. Pinned was one word for it. Controlled was another. The kill zone had shifted uphill, and the enemy knew it. Their mortar crew had stopped aiming at the SEALs and started hunting the unseen shooter instead. A rocket snapped past the ridge and exploded in a plume of dirt, but when the smoke thinned, the woman was already gone from that position. Then the radio crackled. Not her voice. A man's voice. Young. Panicked. Close enough to belong to someone on the ridge. "Baker is hit," it burst out, then dissolved into static. Mercer stiffened. Baker was one of the forward callsigns tied to the recon element that had gone dark an hour ago. The woman answered with another shot. A machine gun at the enemy tree line went silent. One of the SEALs stared through the smoke. "Is she covering Baker? Or using him?" another said. The suspicion landed hard because it fit the silence too well. On the ridge, the woman moved again, lower now, almost crawling between shards of slate. She reached something hidden in the rock, a dark pouch, a bundle wrapped in camo netting, or maybe just gear the eye could not separate from shadow. Whatever it was, she did not leave it behind. A fresh burst of gunfire ripped across the slope. The enemy shifted toward her last known position, and for one dangerous second Mercer saw the shape of the trap. They weren't just trying to kill a sniper. They were trying to seize whatever she was guarding. His jaw tightened. "Hold," he ordered. "No one climbs that ridge yet." The word surprised even him. Not because he trusted her. Because he didn't. Not yet. But the thing in her hands, or under her protection, had changed the fight. And until that thing was understood, every move uphill could turn into a body count. Above them, hidden in the smoke, the woman fired again. And this time, Mercer realized the question was no longer who she was. It was what, exactly, she refused to let fall into enemy hands. Mercer snapped a hand signal to the team, and the SEALs broke from the rocks in a low, disciplined rush. The enemy had changed shape again. Their fire no longer cut across the valley in straight, angry bursts. It came in pulses now, short, measured, designed to herd, not kill. That was worse. A round cracked into the stone beside Tanner's boot, sending chips across his cheek. He flinched, then kept moving. Another shot struck the ridge above them. The enemy wanted them pinned in the open, pushed into the narrow cut where one machine gun could turn the whole slope into a grave. "Move left." Mercer barked. No one argued. They could not afford to. The woman on the ridge fired twice in quick succession. 2 enemy heads dropped behind a broken slab before they could adjust their angle. Her rifle spoke once more, and the pressure on the seals eased by a fraction. It was just enough. Mercer glanced up through the smoke and saw her shift position again, crawling along the ridgeline with the calm, deliberate motion of someone who knew exactly where every lethal angle lived. She did not waste a round. She did not waste breath. "Whoever she is," Tanner muttered, "she's buying us seconds." Mercer kept his eyes on the slope. "Then use them." A fresh burst tore through the space where they had been a heartbeat earlier. The enemy had seen the movement and adjusted fast. Too fast. One of their shooters had a clear lane now, and the SEALs were forced into a shallow depression between 2 ribs of stone. The woman answered at once. 1 shot. The enemy gunner jerked backward, weapon flying from his hands. Then another shot cracked from the ridge, and the second shooter vanished behind dust and blood. For the first time, the valley went quiet enough to hear breathing. Then Mercer saw the problem. The enemy was not retreating. They were repositioning around the edges, trying to cut off the SEALs from the upper pass. If they made it behind the next outcrop, the ridge would no longer cover the team. The sniper could delay them, but she could not hold the mountain alone. "Ammo check," Mercer said. "Tight," Reyes answered. "Tighter than I like," Tanner added. Mercer looked toward the ridge again. The woman had paused near a jagged break in the rock, one hand braced, rifle angled downhill. Even from that distance, her posture never changed. Controlled. Guarded. Certain. Then a sharp whistle split the air. Mercer froze. The enemy was marking the slope for a mortar line. "Down," he shouted. The first blast hit 50 yards uphill, exploding shale and smoke into the air. The second landed closer. The third shook the ground under their boots. Now the ridge was not just cover. It was becoming a trap. The woman fired through the dust, forcing one mortar spotter to duck before he could correct the aim. But the next round from the valley clipped the stone beside her and showered the ridge in fragments. Mercer saw it instantly. Her position was exposed. And the enemy had finally found the angle they wanted. A new question hung over the mountain, cold and immediate: if the sniper was forced to keep moving, how much longer could she shield the SEALs before the ridge itself became another casualty? Mercer reached the ridge line in a crouch, boots grinding into shale, one hand braced against the rock as another shot cracked through the smoke behind him. The air smelled of dust, cordite, and hot stone. Below, his team held the lower shelf under ragged fire. Above, the woman sniper had shifted again, her silhouette broken by drifting gray and the hard white flash of distant muzzle bursts. He found her position by the spent brass first. 3 casings. Fresh. Piled near a narrow notch in the ridge where the stone had split open like a wound. A torn strip of olive webbing fluttered near the edge, snagged on a thorn bush. Mercer moved in low, one eye on the valley, one on the angle above him. Then he saw it. A sealed satchel, wedged behind a slab of rock and wrapped in a dark field jacket to keep it from the dust. Another round hissed overhead. Mercer froze, then looked from the satchel to the woman. "That what you've been dying to protect?" The sniper did not answer right away. Her rifle stayed pointed downhill, but her left hand tightened once on the stock. The smoke shifted. For a moment, the hard line of her jaw showed through beneath the grime. Not fear. Not pride. Something colder. "Don't touch it," she said. The voice was level, almost flat. It carried no panic, only warning. Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Then tell me what it is. It's the reason you're still alive." Another burst snapped from the valley. Dirt jumped along the ridge face. Mercer pressed closer to the stone, then glanced at the satchel again. It was heavier than it looked. Wired shut. marked with faded coordinates and a strip of red tape already split by shrapnel. He had seen enough field packs, enough dead drops, enough mission scraps to know that kind of weight never meant supplies. "It's intel," he said. "Part of it." A second later, her rifle barked once. Somewhere below, an enemy shooter went silent. Mercer looked at her more sharply now. "You're guarding evidence." "No," her eyes stayed on the valley. "I'm guarding what they're trying to erase." That landed harder than the gunfire. He reached for the satchel, and her rifle swung just enough to stop him without crossing the line into threat. Not aimed at him. Just close enough to make the warning undeniable. "Explain," he said. She finally turned, and in the broken light, Mercer saw the edge of fatigue under her composure. Not weakness. Cost. The kind that came from holding a line alone too long. 2 hours ago, she said, your comms were cut, your route was burned, and the team on this mountain was set up to die clean. This satchel has the overwrite codes, the original grid, and the name of the man who sold it. Mercer said nothing. The next round from the valley hit rock near his knee and shattered into sparks. Her gaze never left him. If that packet leaves this ridge, the wrong people get to call this a failed extraction. If it stays, they lose the lie. Mercer stared at the sealed bag, then at her, and for the first time the fight around them seemed smaller than the thing between them. Not trust. Not yet. But a truth with weight. Below, a voice shouted for bearing corrections. Another seal was pinned in the open. Time was running out. Mercer shifted his grip on the rifle and asked the only question that mattered now. "Who are you working for?" "Then answer me," Mercer said. The woman did not flinch. Smoke drifted past her cheek, softening the hard line of her jaw. In the gray light, the blood on her sleeve had dried nearly black. Her rifle stayed angled downhill, steady as a survey line. "Ridge over watch," she said. It was not an answer. It was a function. Below them, another round snapped off stone and sent shards skittering across Mercer's boots. A seal shouted from the open slope, then went silent. Mercer tightened his grip. "That's not a unit." "No," she said. "It's a tasking." The word landed wrong at first. Too clean. Too deliberate. A flare of orange lit the valley for an instant, and Mercer saw what the smoke had been hiding, a collapsed mule path, a torn satchel half buried in shale, and the edge of a black case chained to a steel stake hammered into the ridge. Not random gear. Not abandoned. Placed. Her eyes flicked toward it once, fast and controlled. Mercer caught the movement. "What's in the case?" This time, her silence was the answer. Another impact cracked near the ridge crest. Dirt sprayed over both of them. Down below, the enemy line shifted left, trying to get an angle on the trapped team. The woman rose just enough to fire one round. The shot was calm, economical, final. A hostile muzzle flash vanished in the smoke. Mercer saw the discipline in it. No wasted motion. No panic. No hesitation. Then he saw the patch on the inside of her wrist, the one the blood and grime had hidden until she shifted her sleeve. A Navy insignia. His expression changed before his words did. "You're military." "Was," she said. That should have been enough. It wasn't. Mercer looked from the insignia to the chained case to the sealed bag in her other hand. "You're not here by accident." "No." "Who sent you?" At that, her eyes finally met his. Cold. Tired. Certain. "Your dead communications chief did." The words cut through the ridge like another gunshot. Mercer went still. The name hit him harder than the rounds in the rocks. Klein. Missing since dawn. The only man on the hill who had known the supply route, the extraction window, and the real reason the enemy had been waiting here. The case, she said, contains the proof he was carrying. Mercer stared at the chain, then at the seal on the bag. His jaw tightened. And you waited until now to tell us? I waited until you had enough men left to believe me. It was brutal, and it was fair. Below, a seal called out that they were pinned and burning through ammo. Another voice answered with a panic Mercer had never liked hearing in his team. The ridge had changed shape again. The enemy was no longer just hunting them. They were hunting the case. Mercer shifted his stance, placing his body between her and the exposed slope without realizing he had done it. She noticed. Her rifle moved with his, covering the same line. For one narrow second, trust formed out of necessity. Then a distant whistle rose from the valley floor. Mortar. The woman's head snapped toward the sound. Move, she said, already reaching for the chained case. Mercer grabbed the wire clamp instead. Not without opening it. Her stare sharpened. If I open it here, we all die. And for the first time, the truth was no longer about who she was. It was about what she had been ordered to protect. The whistle knifed through the smoke a half-second before the first mortar struck below the ridge. Rock jumped. Dirt fanned into the air. The blast rolled up the slope and slapped the team with heat and grit. A second round landed closer, hammering the shale shelf where Mercer and the woman had been arguing over the chained case. Fragments snapped through scrub oak and shattered against stone. Down the spine. Mercer barked. No one moved toward cover. That was the problem. The ridge had no real cover left. Just broken outcroppings, a burned juniper trunk, and a shelf of shale too thin to shield 6 people and a steel case the size of a carbine crate. The enemy was not trying to kill them clean. They were driving them off the high ground. The woman saw it first. Her rifle was already up before the dust settled. They're pushing under the barrage. Mercer dropped behind a slab of rock and tracked where she pointed. Shapes were climbing through the smoke from 2 directions now, not one, for fighters from the western cut, 3 more using the mortar bursts to mask their sprint up the eastern saddle. A pincer. Fast. Deliberate. Not a probe. A recovery assault. Bennett, east side. Mercer shouted. Rios with him. Hale, on me. Dugan, pull security on the case. Dugan reached for the chain. Leave it, the woman snapped. He froze, eyes cutting to Mercer. Another mortar hit 30 yards downslope. The concussion kicked the chained case sideways. Its metal corner slammed against stone with a hard, ugly ring. For one instant every eye on the ridge went to it. The enemy heard that too. Automatic fire stitched the shale above them. The woman did not wait for permission. She slid behind the burned trunk, drove the butt of the rifle into her shoulder, and fired twice in a rhythm too calm for the chaos around her. 2 men on the western cut dropped almost in the same motion, one folding backward, the other spinning off the rocks with his weapon still firing into empty sky. West slowed, Hale said, stunned. Only slowed, Mercer said. He was right. The mortar barrage shifted higher, tighter, pinning the crest while the eastern element climbed hard. Bennett fired 3 round bursts, forcing one fighter to ground, but another made the lip and nearly rolled into their position. Rios met him at arm's length. There was a flash of steel, a grunt, then both men crashed into the dust. Rios came up with blood on his sleeve and the enemy rifle in his hand. The line was collapsing into fragments. That was when the woman changed the fight. Not with another perfect shot. With movement. She abandoned the trunk, lunged through open fire, and hooked the chain of the case around a jagged rock spur at the center of the crest. Then she dragged Mercer's spare smoke grenade from his vest without asking, yanked the pin, and shoved it into a crack below the case. Thick gray smoke erupted low and wide, masking the exact position of the box while leaving the upper sight line open for her rifle. Mercer understood instantly. They're not taking the center, he said. Agency shifted with that decision. The SEALs stopped reacting to incoming fire and started shaping it. Hale and Dugan crossed their arcs, not at the attackers but at the approach lanes feeding the crest. Bennett, bleeding from the forehead now, raked the eastern saddle to force the next climbers into the open. Rios kicked loose a slab of shale that tumbled down the narrow path and broke the momentum of the western push. The woman used every second they bought her. One shot at the lead man on the east. A correction half a breath later on the spotter behind him. Then a third round, lower, not to kill but to strike the mortar tube stacked below in the valley cut. The impact sparked. A shell cook-off followed with a brutal flash, and the next mortar round never left the ground. Silence did not come. The enemy screamed instead and charged. The enemy's charge broke hard against the ridge, but it did not break cleanly. Mercer hauled the nearest SEAL behind a slab of basalt as rounds snapped overhead. Dust jumped from the rock face. Below them, the valley cut filled with smoke, fire, and the raw cries of men who had just lost their mortar cover. The woman stayed kneeling on the ridge line, rifle braced, breath steady. She did not fire at random. She picked the ones still moving with purpose. One enemy fighter rose through the smoke with a launcher on his shoulder. She dropped him before he could aim. Another tried to drag the mortar tube clear. Her next shot struck the tube instead, sending it skidding into the rocks. A third man reached for the ridge path. She cut the dirt inches in front of him, forcing him flat. Mercer watched her work and said nothing for half a second. Then he keyed his mic. "Hold your line," he ordered. "She's covering us." No one argued now. The woman finally moved from the ridge edge, one hand still on the rifle, the other pressed against the dark pouch strapped under her jacket. It had survived the shelling. That was why she had stayed exposed. That was what she had chosen over cover. Mercer stepped toward her, slow but ready. Up close, she looked younger than her shots had made her seem. Calm eyes. Wind-burned face. No insignia on the jacket. No unit patch. Just a woman who had been alone on a ridge and had turned a collapse into a line that still held. "You could have left," Mercer said. Her answer came without pride. "Then the package dies." He glanced at the pouch. "It's not ammo." "No." A fresh burst crackled from the valley floor, but it was weaker now, scattered, desperate. The enemy had lost momentum. The SEALs had regained breath. Mercer reached for the pouch, then stopped. "Open it." She met his stare. "Not here." "Why?" "Because if I open it here, they'll know exactly what they still need to kill." That pulled the last doubt out of Mercer's face. He nodded once. "Then who are you?" She looked past him toward the smoke line, where the last hostile movement was fading. "Captain Elena Voss," she said. "Joint Recovery Detail. Civilian cover until extraction." The words landed in the dirt between them. One of the younger SEALs let out a low, disbelieving breath. "You were with the mission the whole time?" "No," Mercer said, reading the truth a beat before the others. "She was the mission." Elena tightened her grip on the pouch. The ridge station had evidence. Names, routes, payment records. Enough to collapse the network behind this ambush. They were never supposed to take it back. Mercer stared at her for a long second, then gave a short nod. "And you stayed up here alone to keep it out of their hands." Her voice stayed flat. "That was the order." A flare rose somewhere below the valley, weak and far away. Too late. Too broken. The enemy had stopped pressing the ridge. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was the kind that came after a line had been held by a single stubborn decision. Mercer looked to his men, then back to her. "We move you now." Elena shook her head once. "Not until the package is clear." He frowned. "Clear where?" She finally unfastened the pouch and placed it into his hands. "Now," she said. "It's yours to carry." Mercer weighed it, then understood the cost. She had not been guarding metal or paper. She had been guarding the proof that could end more than this fight. The ridge stayed standing. So did she. And when the SEAL started down with the pouch secured and the wounded moving under cover, no one called her mysterious anymore. They called her by her rank. And this time, no one laughed.